everybody! I am so happy to be back in the library and able to read you a story. I really miss seeing you at the library, but I thought today what I would like to do is tell you a legend or read you a legend. Now, a legend is a special kind of story. It's usually a story that's been told over and over and over again. It's usually very old. It's been told by so many people that by the time somebody new tells it like me, it's kind of hard to figure out if it's a real, true story or not. But it doesn't matter because it's a really good story. And my favorite legend is the one that takes place right here in Basel. And it involves a basilisk. Now, a basilisk, I have a picture, is a very strange creature, a mythical dragon that has got a rooster's head, serpent wings, and a serpent tail. Now, how do you think that could have happened? Well, there's another legend about how a basilisk is born. And it happened one day when there was a rooster walking around the chicken yard and thinking, this is boring. I have nothing to do but walk around the chicken yard to make sure all the hens are fine. And then in the morning I go cock-a-doodle-doo and everybody wakes up. But it's not any fun. The chickens get to have all that fun. They get to lay eggs. And then they get to lay new eggs the next day. I think I would like to lay an egg too. So that's what he did. He laid an egg. But then, of course, he didn't know what to do with it because he's not a chicken. And he thought, and he looked over at the chickens and he said, oh, they're all sitting on their eggs in a nest. Okay, I need to find a place to put my egg. And off he went looking for some place soft and cozy for his egg. And what did he find? But a big pile of poop. Now, being a rooster, he thought, well, that's a nice soft place. And he put the egg in the poop. And then thought, I don't want to sit on that. And he walked away. Well, luckily, out of the grass came a serpent. And she saw the little egg sitting there all by itself. And it happened to be serpent poop that the little egg was sitting on. So the little serpent just curled herself up around the egg and sat there until the egg was ready to hatch. And then she got off. And what do you think came out of that egg? Well, what came out was a basilisk, a rooster's head with a serpent's tongue, serpent's wings, serpent tail, rooster claws, a very strange creature. But this basilisk wasn't just strange looking, it had very strong powers. One of the powers was that it had very bad breath. And if you smelled its breath or you got too close to a basilisk, you could get very, very sick. The other very important power were its eyes. It was said that if you looked into a basilisk's eyes, you would turn to stone and crumble. And so it was a very dangerous kind of dragon. Anyway, I want to tell you about the time, or the legend says, the time that the basilisk came to Basel and was found down in one of the fountains near Gebergasse. Gebergasse is down in Basel City near Barfüßerplatz. And it's called Gebergasse. Well, in English that means Tanner's Alley. And that's where the tanners used to work. Now, tanners were people who took animal skins and turned them into soft leather to make hats and gloves and jackets and saddles and things like that. And now in those days, they had to clean those skins, but they didn't have washing machines, so they had big tubs and they would fill them with water and stomp on the skins until they were nice and soft and clean. And they had to be in a place where there was lots of water. And Gebergasse had a huge fountain. It was a very big fountain that would fill up with water that came in from a river just on the other side, on another street. Now the river's still there if you go down to Barfüßerplatz, but it's under the tram tracks. It's still going. But it would fill up this fountain on Gebergasse, and that's where the story takes place. And the story is taken from this book, Basel's Hidden Stories, written by me, Jeanne, and illustrated by a very, very talented artist, Jooce Garrett. And the story is called The Basilisk and the Baker's Son. One cold, misty morning, when it was still very dark, a baker and his young son, Peter, piled their cart high and pushed it through the city gate. They had risen very early to make the loaves of bread that the people of the city needed for their breakfast. As Peter and his father's cart creaked through the empty Barfüßeplatz, they could hear the monks already chanting in their church. And turning down Gebergasse, they stopped suddenly. A terrible stench was coming from the large open well on the corner. This well was not one of the usual round wells where people would lower their buckets to reach the water. Rather, it was a very large rectangular one that filled with water from a small tunnel in the hill. And stairs led down to the basin, making it easy for the tanners who worked in the neighborhood to fill their buckets with water. But today, the basin was empty, and something was blocking the tunnel. The baker and his son parked their cart at the edge of the well and descended its steps cautiously. Before they had gone very far, they turned and scrambled back up. Oh, the smell coming from the bottom of the well was too disgusting to breathe. It smelled worse than that pile of rotting entrails behind the butcher shed. And then a low, grumbling roar came from deep inside the tunnel. "Oh dear," said the baker, "this is very bad. I think a basilisk has crawled into the tunnel." The baker and his son knew what a basilisk was, a small but powerful dragon with a poisonous breath and with eyes that turned everyone who gazed into them to stone. The baker told his son, "Someone has to go down there and destroy the basilisk. Someone who won't be poisoned by its breath." "What about a tanner?" exclaimed Peter. "They're very strong, and their noses are used to stinky smells." The baker replied, "That's a good idea. Run to the nearest houses and wake up the tanners." So Peter ran to 1, 2, 3 houses, pounding on each door and calling for the tanners to come out and help. The doors slowly opened and these tall, strong men came out saying, "Hey, what's going on?" Peter shouted that there was a basilisk in the well. More people came out and gathered around, gasping in terror at the horrible smell and the fierce roars coming from deep inside the tunnel. A young tanner, who always bragged about his strength and his courage, was pushed forward by his friends. He puffed out his chest and said, "Do not fear. I'll pull that foul beast out by the neck and slaughter him with my sword." Everyone cheered as the tanner climbed down the steps and bent into the dark tunnel. Minutes passed. The people looked at each other. Suddenly there was a scream and a very loud crunch. The sword and bits of stone flew out of the tunnel, but there was no sign of the tanner. Everyone gasped. They all knew what had happened. The tanner had looked into the basilisk's eyes. He had been turned to stone and shattered. "Send another tanner," the people cried. The tanners looked sheepishly at each other and shrugged their huge shoulders. "That basilisk is probably sitting inside the tunnel looking right out at us," said one of them. "How could we possibly avoid its eyes?" Just then Peter cried, "I have an idea," and he ran into the nearest house and returned with a clothespin on his nose and something sticking out of his pocket. He told his father, "I'll get down and face the basilisk." But the baker refused. His son was only a boy. "Papa," the boy said, "if we don't defeat the basilisk, we'll all be poisoned." "Let him try," the people cried. Oh, the baker turned away, covering his eyes, as his son slowly climbed down the steps. Peter stopped before the tunnel, his heart pounding. The tunnel was very dark, and his feet grew numb in the icy water. Even with the clothespin on his nose, the basilisk's breath burnt his nostrils. He wondered whether it hurt terribly to be turned to stone. But just then the basilisk roared. The breath was hot on Peter's face. But Peter knew he must not look up into the monster's eyes. He swallowed hard, and he took his only weapon from his pocket, a small mirror he'd taken from the tanner's house, and he disappeared into the tunnel. All was quiet as everyone peered into the well. Suddenly there was a mighty roar and a strange crackling crunch, and green scales and feathers flew out of the well, followed by a large gush of water. "Peter!" the father yelled as the well began to fill. "Peter!" Everyone held their breath. What had happened to the brave boy? And suddenly Peter broke the surface of the water and took a deep gulp of air. His father snatched him up and took him into his arms. "But how did a boy defeat a basilisk?" the people cried. Peter flashed his mirror. "Simple," he said, smiling broadly. "When I held up the mirror and pointed it at the basilisk looked into his own eyes and turned himself to stone." Everyone cheered, and the tanners cheered loudest of all. The end. Now, if you go down to Barfüßerplatz, look for Gebergasse that runs along, and if you look for number 48, you'll find a fountain. It's not the great big fountain that's there anymore. They took that one away so they could build some stores. But they left a small fountain there, and they put up a plaque that tells the story of the basilisk. And I've been there sometimes when the water is not running in the fountain and all is quiet, and I've put my ear to the fountain, and sometimes I hear what I think is like a roar, very quiet. And I wonder, gee, is there a basilisk still down there, or that came back? But he's way, way down. Now, some people say that's just the trams going by. But I like to think maybe a basilisk has come back to Basel. But we know what to do if he should ever get out. We just need to run to somebody's house and get a mirror. And we are okay. And that's my story for today. I hope you liked it. Bye.